Okay, good afternoon. I don't have too much to say to start the Zoom today. Got a couple of things to mention, but I don't want to waste too much time because we've got a very special guest waiting to speak to us. So I've got some milestones to acknowledge. Lewis Hobden on the boundary actually jumped in and did his first men's Divi 1 game last weekend when there was some changes, so well done to Lewis. We've got a 50th game to Sean O'Shea, one of our field umpires, and a 100th game to Gavin Dawes, so well done, Gav, obviously another field umpire. Just a note about training this week. When we did move to Adelaide Uni Oval, this was the week where there had been a booking on Fred Block. So instead of moving training to somewhere else, we're fortunate the Adelaide Uni women's team have been really supportive and helpful all the way through. They're really good to deal with. Paul Sherwood's an absolute champ. They're happy to share the oval. We can't use our normal change rooms. They're happy for us to use the visitors' change rooms next to the grandstand. So I'll be there nice and early just to point everyone in the right direction. But yeah, we're still training at Adelaide Uni Oval this week. It'll be on the main oval because a Fred Block is being used. Just a note, this is more for the goal umpires, but field umpires need to be aware. The league are working hard to get live scoring occurring in all men's Divi 1 and 2 A grade games. It's going okay, but we're just getting a few issues along the way. If a goal umpire can't access it, we're not starting the game. It's as simple as that. We need to get that resolved. So the message to the goal umpires is don't just give up at the slightest hurdle. We need to get it worked. And so it'll be contact Peter or myself. And if we need to get club contacts or league contacts to help resolve whatever the issue is, then so be it. But we will not start the game until that's up and running. All right. That's all I have for this week. If there's any questions from the weekend's games, either Adelaide Footy League or AFL, hold it back till next week because I want to introduce our special guest. I can see him on the line. Craig, if you want to unmute yourself. Before you do say anything, I had a bit of fun at Mother's Day yesterday. Someone at the table on had the app where AI spits out a bit of a spiel. And we looked up a few different people and I thought, why not let's get AI on to Craig and see what it comes up with. So this is the spiel that AI has produced for you, Craig, and it's pretty good actually. Craig Fleer is a distinguished Australian rules football umpire currently officiating in the Australian Football League, AFL. His umpiring journey began in 2000 with the Glenelg SASFA, and he progressed to the South Australian National Football League, SANFL, in 2004. In 2015, he was honoured with the SANFL Golden Whistle Award and officiated the SANFL Grand Final that same year. Fleer made his AFL debut in round 4 of the 2012 season, overseeing a match between Melbourne and the Western Bulldogs. After a brief hiatus from the AFL list between 2014 and 2016, he returned and has been a consistent presence on the field. By the end of the 2024 season, he had officiated 228 AFL matches, including 11 finals and 2 AFL grand finals in 2020 and 2024. Notably, Fleer became the first South Australian field umpire to officiate an AFL grand final in 2020, a significant milestone in his career. His dedication to the sport extends beyond the professional arena. He actively participates in community umpiring initiatives in South Australia, like this one tonight, sharing his expertise and mentoring aspiring umpires. Known for his calm demeanour and professionalism, Fleer has expressed that each game brings a thrill of living out his dream of umpiring AFL football. His contributions to the game, both on and off the field, have solidified his reputation as a respected figure in Australian football umpiring. How's that?
You've made me very nervous about how much AI actually knows about my life. That's what you've done.
Yeah, a bit of personal stuff I left out. No, just joking. Well, mate, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I know you were initially going to come last Wednesday, and then there was a change in the appointment, so you ended up going to Perth.
Yeah, I did. Found out Tuesday afternoon that I needed to go to Perth Wednesday morning. So it was, yeah, a nice phone call to get to say you're going to Perth, but it was obviously came at the cost of coming out to training last week.
Oh, you're here with us tonight, mate, which we really are grateful for. So, not many or at any umpires are full time these days. What do you do for work? How did that change of appointments impact on work?
Thankfully, I'm very loose with my work, so I'm an electrician and I've got my own business. So I'm able to pick and choose what work I do and don't do, and when I'm able to do it. So thankfully, having that flexibility meant that a phone call like last Tuesday isn't too much of a imposition.
Yeah, yeah. And you've got a family. Tell us about that. How many kids?
Just the one at the moment. She's 8, so she's in grade 3 at school. And yeah, loving life. She wasn't thrilled when I told her I was going to Perth for 3 days, but that's bad luck.
Exactly. So, take us back to the beginning. I don't really mean your umpiring journey. Tell us about what made you love footy to start with, as a kid, just growing up.
Yeah, it's probably I've got a strange journey, I'm going to call it that, because neither of my parents were into sport at all. So not just footy, but any sport. So like the only way I got introduced into sport of any type was through friends at school and just doing sport at school. And footy was one of those that I loved doing at lunch and recess with other kids, just playing marks up. And from there, I just started watching footy on the TV, and I guess I just became a bit of a footy nerd, if you want to call me that. Like I knew every player. I think I knew every umpire as well. That's probably a bit weird, but yeah, I just loved watching footy, and I'd like to think I knew a lot about the game. Like I never played, but yeah, like I loved watching it, knew every player. And then the school simply put an ad in the newsletter saying that they needed an umpire for the year 2 3s on a Saturday morning, and I wanted to get out of home on weekends. So I'm like, this is a great opportunity to get out of the house and earn a little bit of pocket money and be involved in the game that I loved watching. So that was how my journey started.
Did you used to go to the footy as a kid, or just watch it on telly?
No, I only watched it on telly. Like both my parents were relatively poor. I'm happy to say that we were fairly poor as a family. So yeah, we never had the opportunity to go to the footy. So I was only watching it on the TV for me.
Yeah, nice. And your journey, starting out and getting out to the sample, how did that progress?
Yeah. So as AI mentioned, started at Glenelg. So under Kevin Wallace and Jeff Jeans, if anyone remembers names like that. Funny enough, I bumped into Jeff Jeans out at Southern the other week when I went out there for community umpiring week. So that was kind of cool to go full circle and see him, 25 years after him being one of my first coaches. So that was pretty cool. Um, so yeah, started at Glenelg, did a few years there, and then through to independent schools under John Rogers and Craig Glennon, and then out to Sandford under 17s and built up from there up to league footy in 2009, I think, from memory.
Yeah. And I had the pleasure of umpiring in the very early days, for you, and very late days for me. I think I may have said this story before, but I always thought your opinions on free kicks when we were out umpiring at, the quarter time breaks, you were the one that I had the most confidence in assessing a decision, I distinctly remember that. I was like, you've always had this really strong decision making ability, which has obviously meant you've been able to get to where you've got to. You've always been confident in the knowledge of the rules and how to implement them.
Yeah, look, possibly sometimes a little bit too confident in the knowledge and implementation of it. I don't recommend anyone do this, but I can certainly recall an under 17s game where I think it was John Rogers or one of the coaches came in and challenged me on something at halftime that I'd done in the second quarter, and I just quoted the rule book and said, well, this is why I did it, and they just said, no, that's nonsense. And then they walked off, and as we were walking out after halftime, I actually took the rule book that I had in my bag and actually physically showed Johnny Rogers the rule.
Wow.
So yeah, it didn't go down very well. I don't recommend anyone to do that, but yeah, ultimately, knowledge of the laws is our biggest tool and the biggest thing we need to know. So yeah, when you're right, you might as well let someone know.
And your bouncing has always been a feature of your game too. Is that something you've always been able to do?
It took a lot of hard work. when I first started umpiring, as soon as I got home from school, I'd jump straight across to the park that was just down the road, take a footy with me, and I'd bounce a ball for an hour. I reckon the people that lived around there must have absolutely hated me just hearing this ball thud into the ground every day after school. But I reckon I did that for probably 3 or 4 years at the beginning of my journey. And as much as that's killed my hamstrings and my back right now, it's also enabled me to be a consistent bouncer. So I certainly think it's a testament to the statement of the more hours you can put into doing something, the better and more consistent you're going to get at it.
Out of interest, when was the last time you had a recall? I can't remember seeing you do a recall.
Off the top of my head, I probably couldn't tell you. Not in an AFL match. I couldn't tell you the last one.
Is that right? You've never had a recall in
No,
AFL?
oh no, I have. I reckon I've had. I'm going to say 10. I reckon I've had in my AFL career.
Man, I did that in one season. Easy, half a season. So it was mentioned in AI how you had a hiatus. I know the story, but for those that don't know the story, what made you come off the AFL panel?
Well, it depends who you ask, I reckon. Yeah, look, it was probably a combination of things. So that was at the end of the 2024 season. So I'd been on the list for 3 years. I was still living in Adelaide at that time.
Hang on, you said 2024, you meant 2014, is that right?
Oh, sorry. Yep, 2014. My bad. Well picked up. Yeah, so 2014, that was right in the middle of when the AFL had a heavy push for all umpires to move to Melbourne. And my family situation at that particular point in time didn't allow me to move to Melbourne. And effectively, I was hit with a little bit of an ultimatum of move to Melbourne or your position on the list will be under review. And that was where it ended up. And then they created their narrative of, well, these are the reasons we're not going to give you a contract for next year. And it's like, well, that's your decision. I can't change that. I'm staying at home for family reasons. So, yeah, that was how that all came about. And then, thankfully, 2015 happened, and I still had a lot of fun out at the Sandful. I got to umpire with some of my close mates. I managed to umpire the grand final and get the golden whistle. And, the AFL then offered me another contract. And thankfully, the family situation, which was the reason I couldn't move, had changed. And I was in a position to be able to move back to Melbourne for the start of 2016. So I was re-offered my position again.
Yeah, excellent. So getting on to the first grand final, which was 2020, COVID year. Tell us about that experience.
Best year ever. Like I know here in Adelaide, COVID was very different. You had a total of 3 days of lockdown, was it? Was it 3 or 4 days? So like it was, yeah, you guys had a very different experience to the most of Melbourne, and you certainly had a better experience. But for us, we had 24 hours notice to get out of Melbourne. And it was a pack your bags. We don't know how long you're going to be away for. And then I returned home, I think it was 121 days later. So it was amazing to not have to be in Melbourne. I don't often say that, as I do enjoy Melbourne, having lived there for 6 years. But for that particular moment in time, I was thrilled to be out of that place. So yeah, living in the on the Gold Coast was pretty cool. As much as we had some restrictions on what we could and couldn't do, it was relatively flexible. And because we were all living in the same place, there were so many of us that loved golf, and golf became a very regular occurrence. And where we had to have our COVID tests before every game was at a golf course. So it would always be go get your COVID test and then go play a round of golf. So, yeah, it was an incredible 3.5 months that the season was going on for, and then a little bit after where we got to travel back to Adelaide, because there was no way we're getting to Adelaide any other way.
Yeah, and then the actual grand final itself, what were your memories of that night?
It was a crazy night. It rained all day, I think, in Brisbane. And probably the strangest thing was more the lead up to the grand final, because the only way people in Melbourne were interacting with us was through media. So I guess the only pre-game things that I had to deal with during the week was just media heavy. So radio interviews, some newspaper things. So it made it for a lot less stressful lead in to the grand final. And we also effectively had to pack everything up that, our lives that we'd been living out of suitcases for the last 3 months. We had to pack all that up on the morning of the grand final and throw it all into a bus to travel to Brisbane because we were checking into new accommodation in Brisbane. So, like the actual build into the game itself was probably beneficial for me because it didn't really give me much time to sit down and think about the game. Like we were busy thinking about other things like sorting our lives out. So yeah, in many ways it was actually a blessing to have that kind of distraction. And it wasn't until I actually stepped on the ground and the siren blew for 1 minute before the start of the game that I'm like, oh crap, this is actually happening. And I started to get a little bit nervous. So, if I compare that to last year, I reckon on the Thursday last year, I started to get nervous, which is I don't normally get nervous before games. So to be nervous for 48 hours before a game was a long time for me to try and deal with that. So in many ways, I shouldn't put it this way, but in many ways, 2020 was a breeze compared to last year.
Yeah, so you're fortunate enough to be able to then get the grand final experience at the MCG. And even though it ended up being a one-sided game, it must have been amazing to be a part of that.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, from the very first day I went out to umpiring, I'm like, this is what I want to achieve. So to have achieved a grand final at the MCG was a pretty special experience, and it was just a great moment for me to reflect on everyone that had an impact or influence in my umpiring journey, of which there's been many people. So, for me, yes, it was me out there doing it, but it was bits of everyone that had been there for me along the journey. So that was pretty cool to be out there and doing that. Yeah, like the build-in last year it still had some of the same media components, but I think the training at the MCG on the Thursday was when it really kicked in for me. That was when it really hit home. Because we decided early, I'll go back to 2020, like we decided on the Tuesday that I'd be having the first bounce in 2020. And so like that was just set in stone. It was job done, no worries. Whereas last year we didn't decide until the Thursday. And it was as we were about to go out and train on the MCG. And so we did a very light training session. And then Michael Jennings, our head coach, goes, rightio, Fleary, put a couple of bounces down so you can, get used to it. And I'm like, far out, I don't bounce at training ever. And I absolutely doinked them. They were some of the worst bounces I've ever done. I'm just like, oh my goodness, we started last year with a recall and now I've just doinked these two in practice. And that was probably where the nerves came from. But anyway, we moved on from that, and then the grand final parade was pretty cool. Obviously, there was no parade in 2020. Parade was the bus trip up from the Gold Coast to Brisbane. And to have my daughter sitting on my lap during the parade was a pretty special moment, and one that I'll never forget. And then the day itself is just massive. Like you walk out onto the ground and there's pyrotechnics everywhere. There's an enormous stage for Katy Perry to go rambling up, and then you're training, or you're just walking out into this just cauldron where there's already 60 or 70,000 people there, and it's 2 hours before the start of the game, and you're like, this is just wild. It's just incredible. So it's a very unique experience, and to coin a term that Nick Foote, who umpired his first grand final last year, he said, you've just got to treat this like a circus, and it is a circus whether you like it or not, and you've just got to deal with it. So for him to say that, I think that helped his mindset as he went into his first one.
That's good as long as you don't end up being the clowns. That's all right. I could go on all night, but I'm not going to. I know there's guys on the line would love to ask a question. So if you would like to ask Craig something, unmute yourself, and I'll introduce you to the call or to the Zoom. We've got some guys on the line that like asking questions, and I'm sure they'll want to come on. Come on, guys, don't be shy. Is a chance. Okay, Frankie.
Hey Craig, how are you, mate?
Oh, Frankie, going well, mate.
Good to hear. Good to hear. I won't reminisce about our days in Sejuna. Just wanted to ask you. You obviously mentioned the 2 grand finals and what you've been able to achieve has been awesome in your career so far. But what drives you now, having reached that goal twice now? What's driving you to keep going? Are you trying to chase Stevo down, or what's the goal?
That is an excellent question, and I've got absolutely no desire to chase Stev down. One, because I just won't get there. It's as simple as that. If I can get another 5 years out of my body, I'll be absolutely thrilled. So like for me now, it's more I've achieved what I set out to achieve. So now it's more about the enjoyment factor. So I go out there. There's a lot less pressure on myself. I can go out there and enjoy footy and not have to think about, this doesn't sound right, not have to think about the high pressure environment of it and, trying to succeed anymore. Like I'm a big believer of once you do start enjoying it and you can relax into things, that's when the results will actually come. Because there's too many of us that are set on this high performance trajectory and we're stressed about so many things, but the moment you can just let it go and trust in your own abilities, that's when you'll get the results. So for me, yes, I've achieved it. Would I love to get back and umpire more grand finals? Absolutely. But equally, I'm very content where I am and just going out to enjoy umpiring footy.
Good on you, mate.
Cool. Anyone else?
Yeah, me, Colin. How do you find 4 umpires as compared to 2 early days and 3 recently?
Well, one thing for certain, if there was ever a push to go back to 2 or 3 umpire system at AFL, I'd be quitting in a heartbeat. It's not doable at AFL level. You can't be anywhere near the right positions that you need to be in to make correct calls, and you just break. And to be honest, you'd lose 25% of the current umpiring list if we were to go back. So like 4 umpire system, for us, the main reason it was brought in was to help with our decisional accuracy, which many people argue whether that has or hasn't, and that's perfectly fine. But the other aspect of it was to increase longevity in the best decision makers. And, ultimately for me, if I can get another 5 years out of my body, that's great. If it was 3 umpire system, I wouldn't be able to do that. So when you join the 2, and that's probably the bit that most people seem to forget, they just say 4 umpire system's not working, it's not helping their decisions. But the bit they're forgetting is that it creates an opportunity for the best umpires to be around longer in the game.
I mean, I'm only going on a very short experience 20 years ago, 3 years, and I just know the difference between SANFL and AFL was enormous back then. And of course, it's only got a whole lot quicker. So how you got by with the 3 umpire system before you bought the 4 umpire system, I don't know. So yeah, I guess for those that have experienced it, yeah, there's no going back now, is there?
No, definitely not.
So, anyone else? I've got another question if no one else wants to pop up. All right. So you have your ups and downs. And of course, I follow your journey pretty closely. One of the challenging years for you was the year that there was this focus on umpire dissent. Tell us about what happened to you that year.
Well, to put simply, I'd refused to pay umpire dissent free kicks. So it came, the year you're referring to was 2023, I think, from memory. So the dissent rule got tightened in 2022, and I almost blatantly refused to pay dissent free kicks. So I did miss a few in 2022, and was told that I need to get into line. So early 2023, it was GWS and Carlton, and sort of late-ish in the game. It was a somewhat tight game. I paid a dissent free kick against Steve Cornelio, and looking back on it, it was just one that I shouldn't have even paid. So I don't know why I did it, but yeah, and that just caused a bit of a media storm, because the media have got nothing better to do with their time than to pot individuals for doing something that they deem as wrong. But yeah, and that was probably the first time in my career that I'd had such a heavy focus on an individual decision that I'd paid. And I thought I dealt with it pretty well. Like I tend to just ignore media. Like I don't read much footy media at all. So I thought I'd done pretty well, but I'd actually done terribly at dealing with it. And it really impacted me in ways that I didn't think it would ever impact. And the biggest way that it did impact me, if I go back to what I was mentioning to Frank's, to answer Frank's question, is it actually took away some of my enjoyment of the game. So knowing that there were people out there, saying whatever it was they were saying about me, it actually took away the enjoyment of the game. And once that went for me, I found my performances just followed suit. So I wasn't umpiring horrendously, but I just wasn't umpiring at a high level like I knew I could. So hence why I always come back to, you've got to be enjoying it, because if you're not enjoying it, you're not going to put the effort into caring about your performances and going out there on game day and doing what you do.
I guess part of the benefit of the 4-umpire system is umpires are less individually named as they used to be at times, although it still happens. The landscape of the media these days and social media is to be critical, and obviously Kane Corns sets the standard there. Is there training given to the group? How do AFL umpires deal with that constant criticism? Because it's been there forever, but it's just probably even more intense these days.
Yeah, ultimately, there's only more and more journalists and keyboard warriors out there offering their opinions. Yeah, look, to be honest, I don't think we get enough training on how to deal with these situations. Like, we do have access to psychologists, and the AFL's got assistance programs and the sort that we do have access to, and we've obviously got the AFL UA as well as a resource for us. So I think ultimately we've got the resources out there, but we perhaps just don't know how to use them in the right situation or when the right circumstance pops up. So it's probably an area that needs just a little bit of attention, I reckon, just to ensure that we do look after the mental well-being of each and every umpire that is on the list.
Yeah. So you just said you don't take any notice of media or social media. You try and switch off from it all. It's pretty hard to do.
It is. I'm a bit of a hermit though. I'm quite happy just hiding under a rock and existing in my own little bubble, if I'm being really honest. So yeah, and thankfully with my work as well, it's not like it's not like I'm constantly on social media or anything for that either. So yeah, I'm very grateful to be able to live a slightly reclusive life.
Yeah, cool. All right, Matt Harris has unmuted himself. So Matt, fire away.
That makes me very nervous.
No, I'm not the Matt Harris. I'm another Matt Harris.
Thank goodness for
Matt
that.
Harris's. Right.
I've got a question for you. When you've got 80,000 people screaming at you for a decision, that information comes into your brain. How do you block that out? Because when we're at Campbelltown Oval and we've got 200 people yelling at us for a decision, we need to be able to block that out. How do you do that in such a greater magnitude?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, ultimately, what we always refer to is we just trust what we see. So that's the basis of our decision-making process is just trusting what you've seen from your position. Now, sometimes it's not going to be the right thing that you've seen from your position, but you've just got to trust it as often as possible. And I'm very cautious saying this, but sometimes the crowd can help. Like there's some times where you might only have 75% of the information that you need as to whether a free kick is or isn't happening. And sometimes the noise can actually help affirm that. So it's not a way that I recommend making decisions, but it sometimes can offer assistance. But the majority of the time, it's simply block it out. You know, they are just a blur of noise, and that's probably the biggest difference between AFL games and local games is local games you'll hear individual comments versus 80,000, it's just white noise. It's just a whole bunch of people screaming at the same time. So you don't actually hear any individual comments. So that can be a blessing as well.
Yeah, because I actually find that when they're yelling, that it actually goes to my brain, are they correct or incorrect?
Yeah.
Do I need to sort of try and wipe that out altogether?
Yeah, it's purely trusting what you see. And I reckon I mentioned this a couple of years ago when I came out to amateur league training, and I think a few people laughed at me, but I'll say it again. Like you don't make mistakes on the football field. You might go back and review it and go, I could have done something differently there, or I didn't get that right, or I should have done this. But on the football field, you've done the best you could with the information that you had. So as far as you are concerned, in that moment, you are correct. And for me, that's just a mindset that helps me ignore, what's going on around me. And same at any level of football, you've got to have the ability to just process so quickly. Like one thing's happened, you've got to close that door immediately and move on to the next thing, because the last thing you want to have happen is for something to have happened here, and then the ball's gone 2 or 3 steps down, and you're still thinking about that first thing, and all of a sudden you've missed 2 or 3 things in a row rather than just moving on to the next thing that you need to do.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
So, mate, you've obviously been umpiring a long time and got to know many of the players and I guess big names of AFL footy. Who are some of your favourite players to umpire, the ones you get on well with?
I'm not allowed to say anyone that's currently playing.
Why not?
So what I
The
will
ones you enjoy
say,
umpiring, the ones you get on well with.
yeah, no, so I loved Dusty Martin. He was brilliant, not only as a player, but he didn't actually bother umpires at all. And the only time he did say anything to you, you knew you'd done something wrong. And he was generally right as well. So he was just a very good footballer to watch, and a privilege to be on the football field with him, watching him go about his work. But just the way he actually respected umpires was a very good trait of his. So he'd be up there as one of my favourites.
Yeah. I won't ask you about the ones you least like. I'm sure
Yeah, we'll leave that alone.
So, always a bit of talk about the Brownlow medal and the challenges of doing that. Are you one that would like stats? I know that's always been a bit of a discussion point.
I'd like to just not do the Brownlow medal votes, to be honest.
Oh,
yeah, like I certainly understand why, why it gets kept and why it's done the way it is. But ultimately, my job is to umpire the game of footy, not to tell everyone who was the best player on the ground. So I'd quite happily turf it and give it to someone else, make it someone else's problem. Because it's just an added layer of, of possible media attention that I don't think we really need, to be honest.
Yeah. Do those discussions go for long after a game? Like how? Yeah.
Yep.
They go on and on and on.
Sometimes you're done in 2 minutes, and I've had times where we've still been talking 45 minutes later. There's just some games, like there's some games where it's, it really stands out who are the best players on the field. And then there's games where, whether it's because of the conditions or the way the game was played, or it was just a really even performance from both teams. There are times where you walk off and you've just got absolutely no clue. And that's where it just becomes a little bit of a hit and hope. You go through the team lists and go, yes, yes, no, no, no. Like I say, we'll get down to 7 or 8 players that we might have in there, and then, hope for the best.
If it's Carlton, just give it to Chris.
I didn't say that.
So how was your review from last Thursday night? Did you have a good game?
Thursday. It feels like an eternity ago now. Yeah, that went pretty well. Probably the biggest thing to come out of it was, perhaps the opportunity to have stopped play with the Lockie Schultz knockout. That's probably the biggest moment for us in that game, that we would look back on and go, yeah, we perhaps could have done something different there if we had our time again. But otherwise, I think it was a relatively smooth game, a sort of a far cry from that exact game which I had last year where it was a draw, and I think we paid a player not returning the ball to an umpire at a stoppage free kick. So that, a far cry from last year's version of that game.
So where are you umpiring this week?
At this stage, because I'm always nervous to say this is where I'm going, at this stage, I'm here for Port Adelaide Geelong.
Oh, nice one. Very good. Well, mate, the time's about to run out. And that we've asked you plenty, you've given us plenty. We're super proud of you. Every time, I see you, I really take special note. And we love watching you umpire because you are top notch. And well done for everything you achieved. Hopefully you can get another grand final or 3.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
And and you're living here in Adelaide, so we'll see you around the traps.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Craig. And for everyone else, we will catch you on Wednesday night training, Adelaide Uni Main Oval.